Imagine a young Hebrew, far from his homeland, surrounded by a world that seemed to conspire against his faith. Daniel, an ordinary man, finds himself at the center of prophecies that would shape not only his destiny, but the future of humanity. What this young man witnessed in a foreign court transcends time and resonates to this day. The visions he received were not mere stories, but powerful messages that echo in every corner of the globe. And what if I told you that the prophecies of Daniel contain secrets that many prefer to ignore? What would you do if you could unravel mysteries that reveal events of our own time? Each symbol, each dream carries a profound meaning that invites us to reflect. But are we ready to face the truth hidden between the lines? As we navigate these revelations, prepare to question everything you thought you knew about the end of times. The journey we are about to embark on may change your perspective and perhaps even your life. Do not look away, for what is to come may be more impactful than you imagine. Let's together uncover the mysteries of the Book of Daniel. The Book of Daniel, one of those texts that has always fascinated me, especially because of the environment in which it was written. Imagine yourself in Babylon during the exile, a period that was undoubtedly one of the most challenging for the Jews. They were torn from their land, Jerusalem, and thrown into a completely different place, far from their traditions and customs. In this scenario, Daniel and his compatriots found themselves in a constant struggle to maintain their cultural and religious identity while being bombarded by influences from Babylonian culture. Babylon, with its grandeur and opulence, was a world apart. The Jews faced a society that worshipped strange gods and had a way of life completely different from what they were used to. This generated not only a cultural shock, but also a moral dilemma. How to remain faithful to God in an environment that seemed so hostile? Daniel, for instance, stood out for his ability to interpret dreams and visions, which placed him in a privileged position, but also exposed him to dangers. The struggle for spiritual survival was real, and this is deeply reflected in the pages of the book. Moreover, the Persian influence cannot be ignored. After the fall of Babylon, the Jews faced new challenges under Persian rule. The combination of two such distinct cultures meant that the Jews had to adapt even more without losing sight of their roots. The way Daniel and his friends behaved during these difficult times is a valuable lesson about faith and resilience. They not only survived, they thrived, serving as examples of fidelity in the face of adversity. Another interesting point is how exile was not just an experience of suffering, but also an opportunity for reflection and spiritual renewal. The Jews, seeing themselves far from their homeland, began to rethink their identity and what it meant to be part of the people of God. This introspection influenced the writing of the Book of Daniel, which is not only a historical account, but also a message of hope and faith. Ultimately, the historical and cultural context of the Book of Daniel gives us an incredible perspective on the struggle for identity and the need to maintain faith in the face of difficulties. The Babylonian exile was not just a tragic event, but a catalyst for the development of a theology that sought to understand the sovereignty of God amid chaos. It's as if Daniel was saying, "Yes, we are far from home, but God is still with us." Now, let's talk about the literary structure of the Book of Daniel. It is fascinating to notice how this text is a patchwork of different literary genres. We have historical narratives that tell us about the experiences of Daniel and his friends in the Babylonian court, but we also find apocalyptic visions that seem to have come out of a science fiction movie. This mix of styles is part of what makes the book so rich and intriguing. The historical narratives, such as the famous story of the fiery furnace, serve not only to entertain. They have a deeper purpose, to show the faithfulness of Daniel and his friends in a hostile context. These stories are told in a way that makes us reflect on courage and faith, while connecting us with the experience of a people facing adversities. The narrative structure is engaging, and makes us feel as if we are living those moments alongside Daniel. On the other hand, the apocalyptic visions and dreams bring a new dimension to the book. Here, Daniel is not just a young Hebrew in exile. He becomes a prophet, someone who has access to divine revelations about the future. These apocalyptic elements are not just predictions, but also reflections on the struggle between good and evil, God's justice, and the hope for a better future. Each vision is a piece of a larger puzzle that offers comfort and perspective in difficult times. One thing that impresses me is how these different genres intertwine. The historical narratives create a context for the apocalyptic visions and vice versa. For example, in recounting the fall of Babylon, the author also gives us insight into what this means in terms of the fulfillment of God's promises. This structure is not just a matter of form, it is essential to the message that the book aims to convey. Finally, the diversity of literary genres in the Book of Daniel invites us to a careful and reflective reading. Each part of the book has its own flavor and purpose, but together they form a powerful message about faith, hope, and the sovereignty of God throughout history. It's as if the author is saying, here are the stories, but here are also the deep truths you need to understand. And honestly, this combination is what makes the book so impactful even today. When we talk about the prophecies in the book of Daniel, the conversation gains a new intensity. The prophecies are not merely predictions of the future, they are a window to understanding God's plan for humanity. One of the most well-known is the vision of the four beasts, which represents four empires that would arise on the earth. Each beast has its characteristics and symbolizes not only temporal power, but also the opposition to God's people. This prompts us to reflect on the nature of kingdoms and their fleeting existence in light of divine sovereignty. The statue of Nebuchadnezzar is another prophecy that deserves attention. Composed of different metals, each part represents an empire that would have dominion over the earth. This vision is a way for God to show that, despite the appearances and power of human kingdoms, He is in control. The stone that destroys the statue represents God's eternal kingdom, a powerful reminder that, even amid difficulties, there is hope for redemption and a promised, glorious future. Another fascinating aspect of Daniel's prophecies is the 70 weeks. This prophecy is one of the most complex and discussed, involving a timeline that extends to messianic times. The interpretation of the 70 weeks provokes heated debates among theologians and scholars. However, what is undeniable is that this prophecy points to the coming of the Messiah and the restoration of all things, a message of hope that resonates deeply in times of crisis. These prophecies, though written thousands of years ago, still speak to our hearts today. They remind us that, even when everything seems lost, God has a plan. Daniel's visions are not just for an exiled people, but for all of us who seek to understand our place in history and our relationship with the divine. Each interpretation of these prophecies is an opportunity for us to connect with the larger narrative of salvation and God's sovereignty. Therefore, as we explore the major prophecies in the book of Daniel, we are invited to look beyond the text and understand the universal truths hidden behind the images and symbols. They speak to us about power, hope, and the certainty that God is always in control, even when circumstances suggest otherwise. The message is clear: the future is in God's hands, and we can trust that He will fulfill His promises. Now, let's enter the field of history and examine how the prophecies in the book of Daniel have been fulfilled over the centuries. One of the most intriguing aspects is the vision of the four beasts, which has revealed itself in concrete historical events. The succession of empires, Babylonian, Medo-Persian, Greek, and Roman, is a testament to the fulfillment of Daniel's words. Each empire rose and fell, and history shows us that even amid instability, God's hand was guiding events. The Medo-Persian Empire, which succeeded Babylon, is a clear example of how Daniel's prophecies came to pass. What seemed like a period of despair for the exiled Jews became a time of restoration. King Cyrus, for example, allowed the Jews to return to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple. This is proof that God not only knows the future, but also acts in history to fulfill his promises. The return of the exiles is an act of grace that demonstrates God's restoring power. On the other hand, Greek dominance under Alexander the Great also fits into Daniel's prophecies. The speed with which Alexander conquered lands and how his death led to the division of the empire among his generals were details that were prophesied. This history makes us realize that God's sovereignty extends over nations and that he has a plan that goes beyond what we can imagine. History is not just a sequence of random events. It is the unfolding of a divine purpose. Finally, we cannot forget the Roman Empire. When we look at the history of Roman dominion, we see that it fits perfectly into the prophecies of Daniel. When we start to delve into the prophecies of the book of Daniel, it's as if we are opening a box of surprises. Each of them carries not only a message, but also a rich theological background. One of the most fascinating elements is the vision of the four beasts, which represents four kingdoms that would arise on earth. Each beast has its specific characteristics, reflecting not only power, but also the corruption and decay that accompany these empires. The first beast, for example, is like a lion, an allusion to the Babylonian Empire, which was known for its strength and power. This image is not just poetic. It connects directly with history and the way these empires presented themselves to the world. Another striking symbol is the statue of Nebuchadnezzar, which presents us with a timeline of the kingdoms that would dominate the world stage. The head of gold, representing Babylon, is followed by other parts made of less noble metals, such as silver and bronze, which represent the Medo-Persian and Greek kingdoms, respectively. What is interesting here is that this hierarchical structure is not just a description of the kingdoms, but also a critique of the ephemeral nature of human power. It's as if Daniel is saying, "Look at these grand kingdoms, but know that they will not last forever." This message resonates deeply, especially in times of political uncertainty. The prophecy of the 70 weeks is another intriguing aspect that has puzzled scholars and theologians for centuries. This prophecy is often interpreted as a chronology that relates to the coming of the Messiah. The idea that there is a predetermined time by God for redemption and restoration is a central theme not only in the book of Daniel, but throughout the Bible. What fascinates me is how this prophecy intertwines with the messianic expectation of the Jewish people, who have always awaited the arrival of a Savior to liberate them. When we read this part, we can feel the hope and anxiety pulsing through the words. In addition to these, there are other apocalyptic visions that Daniel receives, such as that of the ram and the goat, which depict conflicts between kingdoms and the struggle between good and evil. These visions not only reveal the future, but also serve as a warning to the Jewish community of the time, urging them to remain steadfast in their faith, even when confronted with oppression. It is a powerful reminder that even in times of crisis, there is a divine purpose at work. Each image, each symbol, carries a message that transcends time. Finally, when we analyze these prophecies, it is impossible not to notice how they have shaped the theological understanding of God's sovereignty over history. Daniel not only presents a vision of the future, but also reinforces the idea that God is in control, even when everything seems chaotic. This is a message that still resonates today in a world often marked by uncertainty. The prophecies of the book of Daniel invite us to reflect on how history unfolds under divine guidance, and how each of us plays a role in this greater narrative. When we look at history, it is fascinating to note how the prophecies of the book of Daniel have unfolded before our eyes. The transition from the Babylonian Empire to the Medo-Persian Empire, for example, is not just a historical event, but a fulfillment of the vision of the four beasts. The fall of Babylon and the rise of the Medo-Persians are often seen as a divine miracle, where what seemed impossible came to pass. The speed with which this occurred makes us reflect on the role of divine providence in history. It's as if, with each turn of the century, we could see the pieces of the puzzle fitting together. The Greek dominion under Alexander the Great is another clear example of how the prophecies of Daniel manifested. The vision of the goat attacking the ram becomes a powerful symbol of this conquest. What is impressive is that even after this conquest, Greek culture would leave an indelible mark on the world, influencing language, philosophy, and even the way we understand spirituality. Daniel, by predicting these events, was not only foreseeing the rise and fall of kingdoms, but also the cultural transformation that would accompany these changes. It is a testament to how history is not merely a succession of events, but a rich and complex tapestry. In the transition to the Roman Empire, the prophecies of Daniel continue to be fulfilled. The way Rome dominated the known world is, in many respects, a continuation of the narrative initiated by Daniel. He not only predicted the rise of Rome, but also how this power would become a fertile ground for the emergence of Christianity. The impact of the Roman Empire on the spread of Christ's message is undeniable, leading us to reflect on the importance of historical context in the interpretation of prophecies. Each kingdom that arose brought with it not only challenges, but also opportunities for the manifestation of the divine plan. The theological interpretations regarding the fulfillment of prophecies are varied. For many, the vision of the 70 weeks connects directly with the history of Israel, culminating in the coming of Jesus Christ. This timeline, when analyzed carefully, reveals a God who acts supernaturally in human history. It is as if, by looking to the past, we can glimpse God's hand guiding events, shaping the destiny of His people and preparing the way for redemption. This perspective helps us understand that even in times of crisis, there is a greater purpose at work. Finally, when we consider how the prophecies of Daniel have been fulfilled throughout history, we are confronted with the question of faith. For the Jews who lived during the Babylonian exile, these prophecies served as a beacon of hope in desperate times. For us today, they continue to offer a similar comfort. By looking at past events, we can find security in the promise that God not only knows the future, but is also actively involved in its fulfillment. This certainty encourages us to live with hope, even when the fog of uncertainty envelops us. When I think about the importance of the book of Daniel, I immediately recall how it has shaped theological traditions in both Judaism and Christianity. It is fascinating to note that while the narrative of Daniel is deeply rooted in the historical context of the Babylonian exile, its implications transcend this period. The book offers a vision of hope and resistance in the face of oppression, a theme that becomes central for the Jews during the exile and later for Christians. The figure of Daniel, a man of faith in the midst of an oppressive system, becomes a powerful symbol for the struggle for faith in any era. In Jewish theology, Daniel is seen as a prophet and a model of integrity. His ability to interpret dreams and visions, such as the famous statue of Nebuchadnezzar, not only highlights him as a wise man, but also as someone chosen by God to reveal profound truths about the future. Jewish eschatology, which focuses on God's promises to His people, is strongly influenced by Daniel, especially concerning the hope of restoration and redemption. This aspect becomes even more relevant when we observe the Jewish diaspora, where the figure of Daniel transforms into an icon of cultural and spiritual resistance. For Christians, the book of Daniel also plays a vital role in shaping eschatology. The messianic interpretation of the prophecies contained in the book, such as the vision of the Son of Man that appears in Daniel 7, is seen as a foreshadowing of Christ. This connection between Daniel and Jesus is a focal point in Christian theology, where Daniel is seen as anticipating the messianic role. The way Daniel positions himself in relation to the Babylonian kingdom without losing faith serves as a model for Christians on how to live in a world that often opposes the values of the kingdom of God. Moreover, Daniel's influence also extends to issues of justice and final judgment. The apocalyptic visions presented in the book, which speak of the triumph of good over evil, resonate with the Christian hope of Christ's return and the establishment of a new heaven and a new earth. It is interesting to observe how these ideas of hope and judgment intertwine, showing that both Jews and Christians can find comfort and direction in their promises. The way the book addresses the certainty of God's promises being fulfilled is a theme that reverberates through the centuries. Finally, the influence of the book of Daniel goes beyond formal theology. Its stories and visions permeate popular culture, from films to contemporary literature, always evoking the struggle between faith and oppression. This demonstrates that, regardless of context, Daniel's message continues to resonate in contemporary issues of faith, identity, and resistance. Thus, the impact of the Book of Daniel is a testament to its enduring relevance in shaping spirituality in both Judaism and Christianity. When we delve into the apocalyptic aspects of the Book of Daniel, we are soon confronted with a rich tapestry of visions and revelations that speak about the future. The book is undoubtedly one of the first texts in the Bible to present a clear apocalyptic structure. These visions are not just intriguing narratives, but also deep reflections on the struggle between the forces of good and evil. The way Daniel receives these revelations shows us that he is not merely a spectator. He is an active agent in communicating divine truths. One of the most striking aspects of the book of Daniel is its interconnection with other apocalyptic works in the Bible, especially the book of Revelation. The imagery of beasts, kingdoms, and judgments that we find in Daniel echoes throughout the pages of the New Testament. It is as if Daniel planted the seeds that would later flourish in other apocalyptic traditions. This relationship is particularly evident in the visions about the kingdoms of the earth and the eternal kingdom of God, which are central themes in both Daniel and John's Revelation. Daniel's role as an apocalyptic prophet is also significant because he addresses issues that go beyond his time. While his visions are undoubtedly relevant to the Babylonian exile, they also project into a broader future. The messages of hope and judgment that permeate the book speak not only to Daniel's contemporaries, but also to future generations seeking understanding about humanity's ultimate destiny. This universality of Daniel's apocalyptic messages contributes to their durability throughout history. Moreover, the apocalyptic literature, of which Daniel is a precursor, is characterized by complex symbolism and rich language. The visions that Daniel has, such as that of the Lamb and the four beasts, are laden with meanings that have sparked debates and interpretations over the centuries.